Conference is the biggest PR event in Annenberg every year, and it brings together the academic community with the professional community. And the dynamic combination of those ideas makes for a really interesting evening.
When I was a graduate student here at USC, I had Doc Smith. I remember going to see him at office hours one time because I had some questions about a particular case that he had talked about in class. He said, Glenn, you know, you're going to be advising CEOs someday soon. And you need to be able to trust your judgment, your instincts, the knowledge that you've gained, the experience you've gained from many people. And you need to believe in yourself. After Doc Smith passed away in 1988, we have the idea of creating a symposium, the Kenneth Owler Smith Symposium.
The combination of the content and the combination of the, the first-class presenters and speakers that the symposium has had, I think, has had a really positive impact on the public relations industry and the profession.
We're focused on the topic of the future. And so the panelists that we bring on board, it's a unique opportunity to not just talk about the current experiences, but reflect upon what's happening in the industry today and how their jobs and the people they hire are going to be impacted by it.
Being at USC and having the Trojan Network and the connections we have is such a privilege, and the best way to take advantage of that in a tangible way is to show up to opportunities like this. I went to KOS 3 years ago, my freshman year, and I met the CEO of the company that I interned at last summer.
And I use the research in my class every year. It's been incredibly valuable in terms of enriching the educational experience. It gets shared widely, and I know that professionals in the field use it, and I know they share that with senior executives inside their companies.
This year, we looked at 4 big trends facing the public relations industry. How the media is changing, how hybrid is making life different for all of us, polarization, and of course, AI. And we looked at that through the filter of 4 different generations. So it's the cross-section of how these different generations are feeling about these different trends.
The public relations industry is a very different place today than it was when I started and when I had Doc Smith's class. And it will continue to evolve, and that's one of the key strengths. I think that PR is more important today than it's ever been. There is a tremendous sense of camaraderie that exists within that audience, and everyone wants to help each other out, because that's, again, a legacy of KOS himself.
Let me welcome you to, I can't believe I'm saying this, the 35th Kenneth Owler Smith Symposium. I'll explain in a minute why Glenn and I are up here. But I'm Kirk Stewart, for those of you I have not met. I'm a founding member of the Center for PR board and a proud Annenberg graduate.
Hi, and I'm Glenn Osaki, also a founding member of that PR Center board. It's really special for me to be up here because Kirk hired me at MSL as a graduate student from USC in 1987. So we go back a long way, and it's really a pleasure to share the stage with him as we kick off today's session. As you saw in the video, Ken Smith is the reason that we're here today, and he was someone that was very important to many of us. And I happened to be in 1987, the year that I graduated from here, in his last class. And so I learned so much from him. And one of the things that he taught me was not just about the importance of leadership and the role of public relations and its value when practiced correctly, but he also instilled in me a passion, and I would say even a love for PR, which I proudly wear on my chest for 4 decades later. So he was a very meaningful person in all of our lives, and it really is like a full circle moment for me to be here on this stage during a time when we're able to celebrate all that he did for me and for many others, and we could spread that forward for the generations to come, like all of you guys. Well,
I'll give you my quick Doc Smith story. following my graduation from USC with my undergraduate degree in political science, I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do for the rest of my career. No offense to a degree in political science, but it doesn't train you to do a lot of things. Great liberal arts education, but not quite sure how it gets applied. I was fortunate enough to get connected with Doc, almost by happenstance. And he spent the better part of a day with me, explaining the curriculum, explaining what public relations was, because I had absolutely no idea what that was at the time. Talked a lot about what a career in public relations looked like. And I said, well, that sounds like a pretty interesting and challenging way to make a living. So I enrolled and got my master's degree. Actually, one of the first students to get a master's degree in public relations from the school. I would just say that I'm like Glenn, I'm forever grateful for the impact that he had on me personally, as well as the influence he had throughout my entire career. So fast forward a couple years later, Doc asked me if I would teach, whether I'd be an adjunct and teach public relations in what was then the School of Journalism. This was before Annenberg was here. And I said, well, sure, I'll be more than happy to do that. Sounds like a lot of fun. So then fast forward a couple of years into that teaching stint, I ended up having a student in my class, a graduate student in one of my classes, and he's already given away the punchline, but I just thought this kid was amazing. He was destined to really be have an amazing career in this business. And he was so good, in fact, I hired him. And then he went on to have a 34-year career at MSL. So that was pretty cool. It's actually the best hire I've ever made in my entire life. So, and I made a lot of them. But so part of the reason that we're up here is that, as Glenn mentioned, following his passing in 1988. Glenn and several other of Doc's students decided to create this symposium to really recognize all the contributions he had made to many of us, to the university, and to the profession. Part of the reason that this got created was to feature and highlight leaders in the industry, like our guest this evening, Kelly McGinnis. It's an honor to have you here. We really thank you. I've known Kelly for a long time. She's been gracious enough to be a speaker in the graduate level class I teach in corporate reputation, I think 4 years now running. You'll hear from me shortly. Again. So I guess the last thing I'd say is I'd just like to give a shout out to Fred and Ron. You guys have done an amazing job of keeping this symposium alive for at least for the last 10 years. And I can't thank you enough for all you've done to allow us to have this moment every year. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, the symposium has been such an important part of the PR industry here in Los Angeles. Kirk mentioned in 1990 when we first formed the symposium, and I was a part of MSL, and for the next 15 years, while I was in Los Angeles, we continued to sponsor and support and bring people together at the symposium. Then I moved to Asia, and even when I was there, I would try to come back for it as often as I could because I missed this fraternity, the camaraderie that exists within this room, and being able to see so many people that maybe competitors, but really they're colleagues. And I think that sense of community was something that Ken Smith also instilled in us. So for all those reasons, we're thrilled that you're here with us today. Congratulations to Kelly on behalf of Levi Strauss and the amazing panel discussion that will take place. So now, without further ado, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce my boss. Wow. And I think for everyone that's in the room, whether you are a Annenberg staff or faculty or student, but even alumni or a member of a board that at Annenberg, she's kind of your boss too. So let me please welcome to the stage the one and only Dean of the School of Journalism and Communication.
Thank you. Somebody's glasses. Oh, they're yours, Fred? Sorry. Yep, here they are. Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is amazing. By the way, there are seats down here if you're all in the back. There's a couple here. There's a couple there. So come on, make yourselves at home and settle in. It's a pleasure to join you, Fred. Thank you for the honor of inviting me to come and welcome everybody and present this award. 35th gathering here on our campus. As Fred knows, he doesn't have to twist my arm. It's one of my favorite events, and I love welcoming our industry professional partners, but particularly our alumni back to campus. So I'm hearing that there are some folks here who worked on the very first KOS, other than you two. Jen Floto, is Christian here, and Ron? Amazing. Can you believe what this has turned into? What you all and the PRSSA have created? So thank you. So I know in a few minutes you're going to hear more from Fred and hear about this year's Global Communication Report, their 10th one, which is, as Fred noted, about 4 generations of communicators in the workforce today and the students who are getting ready to join them. And I love looking around tonight and seeing 4 generations represented because we each bring our various perspectives, our backgrounds, our creative talents, and yes, generational notions to the job, but I see something that unifies us, which is a belief in the importance of corporate social responsibility. In Mind the Gap, the center found that a company's purpose, mission, and values remain important to people when they consider working for a company or organization. And 67% of boomers say it's very important, and 60% of Gen X agreed. So not much of a gap. At the same time, and this certainly won't surprise you, in our current political climate, public relations professionals are starting to retreat from taking stands on social issues, on issues of importance to our society and our communities. And I think you'll find that it is one of the interesting takeaways from this year's report. It also won't surprise you that here at Annenberg, our students believe in the importance of taking a stand on important issues, and they believe in the importance of carefully crafted storytelling as a tool for purpose-driven communication. And as one of our amazing students, Anil Doshi, who, by the way, did the first draft of these remarks for me, thank you very much, Anil. Welcome. As she wrote, as storytellers yourselves, you have the knowledge to make a difference, not just for your companies or for your agencies, but for your communities, for your neighbors, and for your peers. And today's PR landscape demands more of you, demands more of us than it ever has. We've talked about so many of them today, the rapid advancements in AI, these socio-political shifts, of course, the polarization that is going along with it, and of course, the challenge of collaborating within these extraordinary, rich, but complicated intergenerational teams. This field is in constant motion. Yet as we work to amplify messages, as we work to build our brands, lasting impact comes from those initiatives that genuinely contribute to society. So ethics, transparency, purpose, those are fundamental values embedded in our PR curriculum here at Annenberg. They're not just buzzwords. They are the foundation for building a better industry. And Levi Strauss exemplifies this ethos. For generations, this is a company that has shown us what it means to lead with purpose. And Kelly McGinnis, we're delighted to present this award to you and, of course, to Levi Strauss to present our Purpose Award. The Purpose Award is a testament to organizations that really set the gold standard for corporate behavior, the ones that champion ethical practices and make a meaningful impact. So that's why we're proud this year to honor Levi Strauss Co., a company whose legacy of profits with purpose dates back 170 years. It's a commitment that extends through the company, that extends to its Levi Strauss Foundation, and really, frankly, has had profound impact on the apparel industry. They have a long-standing practice of challenging the status quo, of supporting issues that matter to their community through active and intentional social responsibility. Or as tonight's honoree shared with Fred on his award-winning CPR podcast, if you don't have it, download it now on your favorite streaming platform. She said, it's the DNA of being part of a community that has always been a part of who we are. We all feel we're part of something bigger than ourselves. I think that's something we would all like and aspire to feel about the companies that we work for and the brands that we lead. As someone who's old enough to remember the 80s, I remember Levi's courage in supporting the fight against HIV/AIDS, an epidemic that was ravaging their local community. It started as a local effort, but it had national impact. More recently, Levi's has been a pioneer in advocacy for gun violence prevention and reproductive rights, making bold statements with initiatives like the Employee Hardship Fund, the Red Tab Foundation, and Time to Vote. And we know how much leadership matters in supporting initiatives like this, in continuing to embody a company's DNA. So that's why we're thrilled to have Kelly McGinnis, Levi's Chief Communications Officer, here with us tonight. While we recognize, again, Kelly, while we recognize your great company, we know how much you matter to this endeavor, and you have embraced this challenge, the challenge of creating campaigns that meet the moment with powerful and purposeful messages, supported, by the way, by timely and accurate data and insights. And of all the notable efforts that you've led, I'm really impressed by your leadership in your company's voter participation advocacy. She founded Time to Vote, an initiative encouraging companies to ensure their employees have enough time off to go and cast their votes. So please join me in congratulating Levi Strauss & Company as the recipient of this year's Purpose Award and welcoming Kelly McGinnis up to the stage.
Thank you. It should be good. Oh my goodness. Well, excuse the notes. It matters tonight what we talk about, so I'm going to be a little bit more disciplined than I usually am. And first off, I want to say thank you, Dean Bay, for that lovely introduction. All of us at Levi Strauss & Company are incredibly grateful for this recognition and for the work that you guys do here at Annenberg. I have to say, I told you this earlier, it's a little bit of a pinch me moment that Willow Bay knows who I am. And I have spent so many years as a fan and really just learning the news from you. So thank you for all you've done for the community. And similarly, we have incredible respect for Annenberg and what it does in its efforts to ensure journalism and communications. Do I need to do anything? Oh, that's good. And our practitioners keep purpose at the center of their work. I've had the privilege, BT invites me to get to speak to many classes here. And I have to say that each and every time I come in so ready to share and impart some wisdom, and I leave both humbled and learning many more things than I brought in on that day. So when I think about that journey to this stage, I think about the many professionals who've helped shape my point of view, a perspective that's founded in that core set of principles. Some of the principles that you talked about, some of us talk about them as the PAGE principles. They come from lots of different places, but I've been incredibly honored to have the chance to be mentored by some of the greats in our profession. And they laid it down for me that there are certain things that are non-negotiables. First and foremost, always tell the truth. There's a lot of TV that says this is about spin, but it's not about spin. It really comes from honesty and transparency. Second, and most importantly for what we're talking about tonight, that actions matter more than words. At Ellis & Co., we recognize that if a company wants a strong reputation, it has to prove it through what it does, not just what it says. We're always asking before we step up, what are we already doing? What can we do? Or what should we be doing? Third, listening is just as important as speaking. Understanding our stakeholders, knowing their needs, concerns, and expectations is essential. It's not hard, but it takes extra time and hustle for sure. And I always tell my team that we get our place at the table by bringing a perspective, but we're so much more powerful, not to bring our own opinions, but bring the voices of the audiences that we're representing. And it takes extra work, but it really gives our voice, it makes our voice matter inside the company. Fourth, reputation is a long game. And comms isn't just a department, but we really are a critical connecting function to drive leadership to be its best. So someone said today that many of us think about us as the conscience of the organization. I don't know if I'm that, but I do think we're the DNA of pulling people together and remembering and holding the mirror up for the organization. And one of the ways we think about that is we think of ourselves as either the periscope or the lighthouse for the organization, using our experience, using data, imagination, and conscience to help guide the company and our decisions to the right endpoint. And that's really where we try to come forward. And I think last and most important is that a company's character is embodied in its culture, and its culture is its people. So every employee is a brand ambassador, a steward, and a guide, and it defines who we are. I'm lucky to work at a company where people feel incredibly proud to be a part of it. And they're proud of it not just because of the brand. Most of them take the job originally because of the brand. But they stay when they learn the values. They stay when they understand what the culture is about, and it becomes something that they're incredibly proud to be a part of. And then on the other side, they hold us to incredibly high expectations of what they expect of us as leaders within the company. So in my experience, working through those guidelines really helps us to understand our work. It helps to guide our contributions in the company. And importantly, it helps us build the trust and credibility that we have within the organization. And for my team, there's no more valuable currency than for folks to know that we're going to say the real, we're going to put the thing on the table, and we're going to hold ourselves to that accountability as an organization. When I came to Levi Strauss & Company, I knew what the company did. Of course we did. I like to say, and I said it to a couple of you guys at the reception, that everybody has a Levi's story. For me, it's a pair of 501s that I stole from my dad's closet when I was probably in high school. And today, they still are summer. They're lemonade, fireflies, and going to the beach with a boombox. If I have those shorts, and my 14-year-old asked me yesterday, do you still have them? And then I said, they're those. And she's like, oh, I know which shorts you're wearing. I mean, it's the one, that's recess for me. And everybody has a version of a Levi's story. But what I didn't know until I joined the company was about our history. And specifically, our record about living our purpose day in and day out. And not only talking about it, but acting on it, and doing it especially when it's really, really hard. The more I learned about the company, the more I realized that I had found my home. I've been there a really long time. It's a place where principles that I had talked about and learned and had been ingrained in me as a communications professional not only guided sort of how we thought about communications, but it really guides the thinking of the organization and how we make decisions. In our vernacular, it's called profits through principles. And it means every decision we make is made through the lens of our values and our purpose, first and foremost. I'll never forget when I first got there and we were going through really challenging economic times. And I asked our head of supply chain, I was like, well, when do we just take a little break on the sustainability? It's more expensive. And he was like, oops, we hired the wrong one. And I was like, lesson learned. It's surprisingly, Levi's is a very small company. We're a well-known brand, but we are a small company. And everyone knows it. We're at the center of culture. We're global. We're a part of people's lives and their history. And as Dean Bay said, we're more than 170 years old. We endure generation after generation. Our products get passed down, and that's given us an incredible platform to work off. We've done it for many years, and that sense of purpose and values, those go all the way back to the beginning. So Levi Strauss himself was an immigrant. He started a dry goods business in the gold rush era, trying to meet the demand for durable goods as people were trying to chase the gold rush. A tailor named Jacob Davis suggested that he put rivets on his durable pants, which were called cover overalls at the time, and that's what invented the modern blue jean. And it's been considered one of the greatest innovations of all time. That history is ingrained in who we are, that sense of innovation, but it's also our commitment to our hometown. One of the things that makes us incredibly proud is in the very first year that Levi Strauss was in business, he donated a substantial part of his profits to a orphanage in San Francisco. It's an organization that we still support today. Likewise, during the Civil War, Dean Bay talked about our commitment to voter engagement. He closed our factories, encouraged everyone to get out and vote on Election Day. And not only did he do that, he encouraged all the other businesses in San Francisco to do the same. Later on, he went to fund scholarships at UC Berkeley, focused on building philanthropy and civic engagement, particularly for women as they were new in getting their education there. We integrated our factories in the 1950s, long before it was required by law. And as I say, we continue to break barriers time and again. One of the things that makes me incredibly proud is that generation after generation has chosen to wear Levi's as sort of their informal uniform of progress. So if you look at that picture of, oh, my slideshow's not going. There was a picture, but it's not there. There's a picture of all the people lined up on the Berlin Wall. And if you look at it, they're all wearing Levi's. That makes us incredibly proud. The same thing at Woodstock. If you were at Woodstock, if you were wearing clothes, you were probably wearing Levi's. All of that makes us incredibly proud. And then, as Dean Bay said, back in the 80s, when a mysterious disease started to really appear in the gay community in San Francisco, and no one knew what it was going to take to save people, our CEO at the time, Bob Haas, stood in the company's lobby and handed out condoms and information pamphlets to really educate people on what they could do to protect themselves during the AIDS crisis. In short, purpose is part of our DNA, and the recent advocacy that we've undertaken, it isn't something new, but it's just the latest chapter in a very long history. It's part of who we are, and that same spirit guides us today. 12 years ago, when I joined Levi Strauss, I quickly realized that the work ahead was not just the work of being a communicator. It was about being a steward of this storied tradition to help the company live up to the guiding philosophy I mentioned earlier. Bob Haas called it profits through principles. And what it means to us is the products that we make are just as important how we make them. And that the way we do business is just as important as our results. In practice, that means to drive progress on sustainability by setting strong climate targets and creating a roadmap to achieve them, as well as talking to consumers about overconsumption and overproduction, as we did with our Buy Better and Wear Longer campaign. It means continuing to work to build a diverse employee base that reflects our fans and communities where we operate, especially today. And it's meant advocating on issues that impact our people. Dean Bay mentioned some of those: gun violence prevention, LGBTQ equality, climate, voting rights, and reproductive rights, just to name a few in the last few years. This has never been about marketing, and it's never been about virtue signaling, and it definitely wasn't about being woke or placating anyone. It was about standing up on behalf of our people and our communities and working both to build a strong business for the long term and to have an outsized impact in the world. I thought it might be a little bit interesting to give you guys a double click on some of the stories that we talked about. At least if I were you, I'd be like, gun violence prevention, why? And it really started with some of our store employees who didn't feel safe in states where people could carry guns. And if you think about it, if you're going to a Levi's store, you're probably going to try on pants. So if you have something in a holster, it's probably not the safest moment. And as we heard those fears from some of our store employees, we started to work on an open letter where we were going to ask our customers just not to carry when they come into our stores. Coincidentally, a customer shot himself in the foot, so he kind of made the point. And still, we invited a tremendous amount of criticism. It was one of the first times that my eyes were open to the polarization and sort of vehement disagreement that we see in public dialogue today happens on LinkedIn, where it's tied to people's professional profiles. It's sort of shocking to me. At the same time, like everyone else, we saw shooting after shooting. They continued to happen. And after Parkland, it was another time when the generation that was on the front lines was saying they wanted more from the generations ahead of them, and particularly of their leaders. It felt like a moment when we should and could do something. And we really looked inside ourselves and asked, what could we do? We had the conversation with our board. We basically said we just wanted to weigh in and say an endorsement for the young people of Parkland and their demands for change. Our board said, we'll support you, but we don't go into issues one and done. So we established the Safer Tomorrow Fund. We've given millions of dollars, and the biggest challenge was that they challenged us to bring the business community to join us. So in our first letter to Congress, there were 4 signatures from CEOs. And then when you move forward to 2022, after Uvalde, we had more than 500 companies join us in a letter to Congress. And you'll recognize that the first federal legislation on gun violence prevention that hadn't been passed for decades was passed. I don't claim that it was the victims and the victims' families who made that happen, but we, as corporate voices, certainly made a contribution and helped make a difference. Similarly, when Roe versus Wade was struck down, we were one of the few companies that were prepared to weigh in. But that started years before, when members of our women's ERG were concerned about the restrictive laws that were going in place in states where we had operations. And they started a conversation internally. That conversation graduated to the executive conference room, and then it went to the board. And at each time, the conversation started with, that's very important. Why are we talking about it here? And the more we talked about it, and we said, this is going to impact our employees, their families, and our communities. And so we got very clear. And as I said before, actions speak louder than words. So the first thing we did was we made sure that we were able to protect our employees, that they would have access to the reproductive health that they needed. And then when the Dobbs decision leaked, we had already written our materials, and we were able to weigh in on that issue, offer a perspective from a company perspective. And once again, we were challenged to rally the business community. We weren't very successful. But what we did was we became a beacon for other companies. And dozens of my peers and our colleagues, both from HR and from communications, called and asked us, how can we make sure that we are able to offer similar support for our employees? So while I think the playbook changes, and it's been changing year over year, time after time, but still it seems to make a difference. In both of those instances, and in every instance for us, it's our people and our purpose that guided our actions. We make these decisions case by case after thorough discussion and debate, and rarely is it a single conversation that leads to a decision. On reproductive rights, I think we met with the executive team and the board probably 3 or 4 times before we said anything publicly, even internally. We always start with a series of questions. I think about of course, we have a little rubric that we ask ourselves in terms of, is it going to impact our business and our people? Can we make a difference? Most importantly, will we be on the right side of history? And then when we decide if we're going to move forward, we work hard to build our relationships, but we also realize that we're going to learn more when we get out into the public dialogue. So it really is a matter of listening and learning from the partners and the advocates who've been in the space. And that's how we came to be founding partners of Time to Vote, alongside our partners at Patagonia and PayPal. Together, the 3 of us were able to rally, and many of you who are professionals in the room were on the receiving end of my phone calls saying, can't we get you in as well? We got more than 2,000 companies to sign up and confirm that their employees, including their hourly employees, would have time off to vote, since Election Day is on a work day here in the U.S. We've been able to impact more than millions of employees here in the U.S. to make sure that they have that. Yeah, it's cool. So when you look forward, and I think everyone was talking about it at the reception, is today there are more challenges than ever to this kind of work, and we can't pretend that there aren't. It's a different landscape, and we absolutely have to navigate it carefully and thoughtfully, and I can't claim to know what's next or how to approach it. And I'll tell you, my advice to our team is we just bend our knees right now, and we're trying to monitor, we're trying not to react, we're trying to be really smart. But I will say that because of our experience in recent years and across our 170 plus year history, there are a few lessons that are guiding how we're evaluating things today. And first and foremost, I started with this, but we look inward. Our most powerful actions have been initiated by employees, whether it was at the beginning of the AIDS crisis or when we were the first company to offer domestic partner benefits. It was our employees who prompted us to act. We have to make sure that we take care of our people first, before we push for change elsewhere. Second, in that same vein, and I say it all the time, actions speak louder than words. It's easy, but not necessarily productive to get really hung up on certain words. But the real is what are we doing is even more important, not what you're calling it. Consistency and authenticity matter, and that word consistency is the most important thing. I know you guys do so many case studies in your classes and talk about when do companies make a mistake. And the answer is almost always a matter of inconsistency with their values. For us, we have a deep, rich history to look back on. So we can say we've been there when it comes to speaking up, and we know when to connect on an issue and how it can connect with our people and our business. That gives us credibility, and that ends up being incredibly valuable currency for us. I talked about it before, but partners help. There's strength in numbers and being able to bring a diverse point of view together, and it helps to have others who can encourage you to keep going, especially when it gets hard, because there are really hard days. That's meant a lot to us, particularly in our most recent work in San Francisco, where we have tried to be part of revitalizing the city. It's starting to come back, but it was a hard couple of years there. Next, data matters. And for us, our positions on gun rights and reproductive rights reflected that the polling, we were in agreement with most of Americans. Yes, there were vocal, influential minorities, but we really weren't on a limb. We were where everyone else was. We were just saying it from a company perspective. And that helped to make a big difference, particularly when people ask the question of, are we going to alienate our fans? And we have never seen, even in our most active days, an impact on our business. In fact, our business has performed really well in some of the most vocal and advocacy days for us. Finally, we can't do everything, and none of us can. So there's a tremendous amount of pressure for all of us, and I know people are feeling especially frustrated right now for us to weigh in on issues, but we really have to prioritize. We have limited resources, we have limited bandwidth inside our organizations, and we have to be thoughtful. So that's not going to give any of us a roadmap. I get that, but those are the things that we're thinking about. It's a singularly challenging time right now, though. We talked about polarization earlier. Somehow everything is politicized today. I don't know why. And it's what has previously been unprecedented is now commonplace, and we just move it on to the next thing. It's sort of shocking. And sadly, we're starting to see companies pull back. We're seeing them change their programs. We're seeing people moderate the language they use. Some of it's due to the possible legal challenges, some of it because of fiduciary responsibility. And while we may not like it, those are very real considerations for company officers. But we still have to find a way, as companies and as individuals and as communicators within our organization, to stay authentic to who we are. And what we've said at Levi's is that we have every intention of continuing to uphold our values. We will continue to be thoughtful about how we do it. We'll look for the right moments and the right partners, and we'll always prioritize impact over headlines. But we're not going to go away. We're going to continue to stand up for our people and for our communities. That's tied to our belief that that's the best way to run our business. And that's always been a driving factor for us, and it will continue to be. When you've been around for more than 170 years, you go through a lot. You have to address what's in front of you, but also keep your eye on the long term. And we talk about that, about looking through both the telescope and the microscope. And we think that it's not only how we last for another 170 years, but that we'll be worthy of doing so. So thank you again, Annenberg community. I know I speak for the nearly 20,000 employees at Levi's around the world when I say this is a tremendous honor. Thank you.
Kelly, thank you very much. That was inspiring and enlightening. I wish there were more companies like Levi's, Levi Strauss. But we're happy that you're here, and we're happy that Levi's is sticking to its principles. Hello, everybody. I'm Fred Cook. Willow, thank you for being here, always. Kirk and Glenn, I don't think there's two more dedicated Trojans than you two guys. It's unbelievable. It's amazing. Thank you very much. And thanks to everybody else that is here tonight. And we have a couple of guests. David Michelson, who is our the man who helped with this research. He's our works with the center as a fellow. Thank you, David, for being here. And thanks to all our board members who have been spending the whole day with us. We really appreciate that. And thanks to Ron and all the students who have helped put this together. Thank you, Ron. We couldn't do it without you. You saw me up here. I've already covered most of my presentation in that video, so I'm just going to... These are my glasses, so I'm going to wear them. I also want to thank our two sponsors of this report, Zeno Group and IABC. Thank you very much. You're going to see Barbie in a minute, and you'll have a chance to ask questions of Kelly when she's on the panel after I'm through. Yeah, that's right. So I'm just going to take 10 minutes to walk you through this report that you all have that you can read and probably read it more easily than I can say it. But this year we tried something different. We've done a study every year. We've looked at every aspect of PR, from ethics to technology to activism to polarization, and we felt like this year it's all sort of coming together. These forces were impacting us in a major way, and Willow mentioned what they were. And wait a minute. There they are. AI, hybrid, changing media, and polarization. Really powerful forces that you all know are impacting us in a big way. And as David said, this is a period of unusual turbulence in our field, and we wanted to see how people were reacting to all these things at the same time. But we also wanted to look at it from a different perspective, a generational one. So we took a macro view of everything, and then we broke it down by generation to see if there was any difference in the way people viewed these trends that are impacting us. And as we talked to 1,000 people, David, right? 1,077, both in agency and corporate, all levels, all generations, and 50% were in the U.S. and 50% were outside of the U.S. Give you a little background. Give you an example of what this looks like, a very simple example. We asked, do you think the future of the PR industry is positive or negative? How do you feel about it? On the left, this is everybody. And we get about a 75% rating on positive, very positive, or somewhat positive. That's not bad. That's not bad considering all the things that are going on in our industry. I'd give that a B. But when we broke it down by groups, you can see each of the four groups are sort of the same. They all feel pretty good about where the industry is headed. And so I think that's something that we can celebrate. But when you look at it a little more closely, on this slide, we ask them to evaluate the impact of these four trends on the industry. And red is Gen Z, orange is millennial, blue is Gen X, and that greenish color, turquoise or whatever it is baby boomers. And I'm happy to say there's still a few baby boomers out there. We were able to find them in our survey. As you can see on this chart, the ones that go to the right, the top two are pretty much positive. People feel positive about the impact of AI and hybrid at this moment. Changing media landscape is sort of a mixed bag. Some people think it's good, some people think it's bad, and polarization most people are not too happy about. And you see these gaps, and that's why we call this Mind the Gap, because there are some gaps that begin to appear between the generations. On this one you can see that Gen Z is not, they're pretty excited about the changing media. They're not as worried about it, and they're not as worried about polarization as everybody else. So that's the beginning of sort of some differences between the generations. Dig a little deeper, and we said, will these things make your job easier? will AI and so forth make your job easier? And the gaps are all across the board. And Gen Z thinks all of these things will make their job easier. I'm not sure how polarization makes your job easier, but it's way different than the older generations. And particularly in hybrid and to media. Both of those things are very important to the younger generations. This one is when you're just looking at AI. So when you look at AI by itself, and you look at it by generations, you can see it's a little murky. It's not too clear what AI is going to... This is in 5 years from now, in 2030. On this side, it looks like everybody thinks that staffing may decrease because of AI. And boomers are the ones that think are the most convinced of that. On the other end, the quality of work is going to be better because of AI. So less people, better quality of work. Creativity is sort of a 50-50. And budgets, agency budgets, Gen Z thinks they will go up the most. The older people think not so much. So there, you begin to see some gaps in terms of AI as you look forward into the future. It's a little different for Gen Z than millennials. Millennials, we all hired millennials when social media became the main thing that we were doing. We all hired millennials because they knew social media. They had grown up with it, and they understood it. They lived in that world. AI is new to all of us. There's no advantage to being young in AI. In fact, probably some of the older members of our audience use it more often than our students. But the fact is, when we ask how much AI expertise do you need for an entry-level job, and the main answer was functional. Functional. That's what do you say? Functional is like in the middle, David, right? Not a very high bar. So I think this is an opportunity for all of the students in the audience. If you can raise the bar and have a better level of expertise in AI, it'll do you well in a job interview. The second opportunity is we ask, who should be training these people if to get from functional to expertise? And it's interesting because not a lot of people chose universities or agencies, and the 15% for one and 12% for the other. So that's an opportunity, I think. At Annenberg, we're inserting AI into all of our PR classes, but we probably need to do more. And agencies are in the same boat, and maybe they can work together with universities to take on this opportunity to train in AI. But it's definitely going to be needed because it's going to be a big part of all of our lives in the future. Let's look at hybrid for a second. Hybrid has gone from being a perk to a prerequisite, especially in public relations. The amount of people who think this slide shows 5 years from now, over 70% of the people we surveyed in all age groups said hybrid would be the way they work 5 years from now. They think it's permanent. And senior management often thinks the other way, and I think it's going to be an uphill battle for them to try to get everybody to work in PR in the office all the time. When you look at it from a perspective of generations, big gap. On the left, we said, how many of you would be willing to take a pay cut in order to have more flexibility with your work? They look like opposing staircases, with baby boomers on the right and on the left, Gen Z and millennials. Now, this does not mean that Gen Z doesn't want to come to the office. You can ask most of the people in this room, they want to come to the office. They just want to not come to the office every single day. They want some level of flexibility. And I think that's reasonable. And I think it's going to be hard for people to change this over the future. As David pointed out earlier today, the baby boomers are the ones, when we ask how many hours a week do you work in the office, they're the least. But they're the least likely to take a pay cut to have that. So, and also we found that agencies, PR people in corporate were indexed higher than people in agencies because agencies have more flexibility. A lot of corporations are moving back to 5 days a week, and the PR people there are even more willing to take a pay cut. So I think we're going to see this going to be either an issue or something that will be permanent in the future. And I think that the most talented employees will go to the places that offer them that flexibility. Then we talked about the changing media. We asked what will be the most relevant media in 5 years. Pretty much everybody thinks social media, but you can see Gen Z indexed higher across the board on all of these things. And I think it's because, like Wayne Gretzky said, they know where the puck is going, and they're already there. They're already in the media that it's going to be part of the future. And I think that's going to be something that we'll be happy about when we get there. Next, we ask a few questions about the next 5 years in media. And you see some big gaps here. Misinformation is everybody's biggest concern, but it's not as big of a concern for Gen Z. Why? Because I think they have been dealing with this social media for a long time, and they have a better sense of what's happening, what's true and what's not true online. And I think they're not as afraid of the future in terms of misinformation. On the bottom two things, will social media be the major source of information in the future? This is strongly agreed, and you see Gen Z's way out in front on that. And also on influencers. Will they be the primary marketing channel in the 5 years? And they also agree with that. Big gaps in terms of the older generation versus the younger. I don't know how many of you would vote this way, but I think they're probably right. We ask, if you had a marketing campaign, what would be the ideal PR program, PR campaign? What would it contain? Everybody said a viral social campaign on TikTok or Instagram would be ideal. A positive review in a national newspaper was ranked very high. This would be like the New York Times by the older generation. Not too bad by the younger, but Taylor Swift beats the New York Times with Gen Z by quite a bit. And the baby boomers are still hanging on for a CNN placement. So that shows you a little bit about what we're talking about. And so there's a difference of opinion, and I think it's going to be a big change in the future for media. And finally, this is the slide that was the most surprising to me. Or maybe not surprising, but depressing. Polarization. We've asked this question for 3 years in a row. Do you think companies have the responsibility to engage on social issues that are not relevant to their business, the way Levi's has with gun control? It's like two stair steps with different people sitting at the top of the stairs. On the left, yes, 52% overall, but Gen Z at 75%. They're still interested in purpose, and so are the millennials. On the other side, no, the older generations don't believe in this as much. And if you look on the right-hand side, 3 years ago was 89% of all PR people thought companies had this responsibility. It dropped a little bit in 1 year, and it dropped a ton in the third year to 52% right now. So it begs the question, is this generation going to be a catalyst to bring those numbers up because of their beliefs, or are they going to become disillusioned the way some of us have, and it'll be the same moving forward? And I think that's a big bet, a big thing that we'll have to look after in the future. But that was the biggest gap we found in this survey, is the interest in companies getting involved with social issues. The next slide is my favorite. We don't show it yet. We figured that since everybody's getting their information from different sources, each generation, we would ask them which generation is the best informed, the most up-to-date on current events and politics and everything else. And what they said was, they were. every generation thought they were the best informed. And that's kind of funny, actually. This is my class, and this is me. These are my students, and this is me. It's kind of a scary thought, isn't it? Only 3% of them think I know anything. But this is an example of why it's important to mind the gap. In a time of disruption the way we are right now, if we think we know everything and nobody else knows anything, that's a very dangerous situation. So we have to work with each other. The younger people have to understand that what the veterans have to say, what they've learned in their careers. But we also have to be willing to listen to them, because you can see the baby boomers don't have that much, I don't want to say respect, but they don't think younger people, because they don't read the Wall Street Journal, they don't watch 60 Minutes, they don't know what's going on. I have a 26-year-old son. He knows way more of what's going on than I do, and he doesn't read anything except his phone. So I think that's going to be an interesting situation for us in the future. And finally, you can go to the next slide. In every area we surveyed, Gen Z stood out. You can see it on these charts. They think differently than we do. They are not bound by tradition, and they don't appear to be afraid of change, because they're actually the ones that are creating the change. Much of this is happening because of Gen Z. And they need our support, I think, more than they need our direction. They know where everything is headed in our industry, but they need our help with training, with flexibility, and with purpose. And I think that those of us that offer that in a company or an agency are going to be the ones that are being most successful. And I think that when you look at all the changes we're going through, I think that actually our industry is in pretty good hands and going forward. And a lot of the people out in here are going to be the leaders tomorrow, and I think we're ready. So that's my opinion on this. But we're going to have a panel to discuss this right now, and we'll see what everybody has to say. And you'll have a chance to ask questions of all of them when it's over. So Barbie, would you mind coming up? And the rest of the panelists? Barbie Siegel is the global CEO of the Zeno Group. She's on our board here. Kelly McGinnis, you just met, who's been at Levi's heading PR for 11 years. Is that right? 11 and a half. Sona Ilifmoon is the CCO at Yahoo. She's also worked at Facebook, Lyft, Toyota, a bunch of great companies. Bill Lamada, I think everybody knows Bill. Bill founded one of the most renowned multicultural agencies in the U.S. And what is your title now besides chairman? Chief Connectivity Officer. And finally, we have our own Gen Z, one of our former students, Kendall Eccles, who has been the last 3 years at Fenty Beauty, right? Yeah, same family. So thank you all for joining us. And Barbie, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Is the mic on? Are we all set? Yes? Can you hear us? Yeah. Oh, you can. Okay. Well, Fred, thank you. What an honor it is to moderate this esteemed panel. Having spent 2 full days here on campus, I can say that I really think we are in great hands. The students here are, wow, like incredible. And I think we've talked about the gaps in the research which Fred took us through. And the question is this really a generational divide, or are we better together? And I think we really are better together. So we're going to start with a quick lightning round here just to warm up. We all know that communications has changed in so many ways. Just tell us quickly, and you each come from a different point of view on different types of jobs. How do you spend your time today? Bill, quickly, we're just going to start with you.
I spend my time reading the news every morning.
Watching CNN?
Correct.
You spend your whole day reading the news?
No, I spend about 30 minutes in the morning watching all the news
Okay.
every single day, including CNN.
And then the rest of the day,
I spend talking to people.
okay.
Talking to people like you and going to events and donating my time.
Okay, Kelly?
You know, I always think about this at the end of the year because when I have my performance review, I always realize that the only thing that breaks through for my organization and my boss is what I did in terms of external earned media. But if I think about my day, usually I spend 75% of my time on internal comms. That's really changed a lot recently. And now the public affairs part of my portfolio takes up all the time. So it's interesting to look and see how the pie chart shifts and then what actually is visible to your peers versus what you actually are doing all day.
Sona?
Wow. So many similar things, lots of time on internal communications. Employees are a hugely important stakeholder for us. Like Bill, I also spend time reading the news, but also my news starts often on social. So I start there and then it's kind of a maze through the day. It's really hard to be completely informed because things are changing hourly. You have to read, you have to go validate. So a lot of time reading and staying informed, staying inspired by different trends. And then, staying in touch with the exec leadership team and the GMs, understanding what's happening with products, staying in touch with the team. And then, having a little bit of space and time to think and get creative.
Hi, everyone. The first part of my day, I'm a consumer. I am reading media, I'm scrolling, and I'm also getting a touch point of what's going on internally so that can guide me throughout my second half of the day in which I'm a producer. That's a lot of my writing, reporting, lots of numbers, especially what Kelly was saying about external. What is the EMV? What are the impressions? So the first half of my day, for sure, consuming information, and then the second half of my day, producing information.
And I think today, for all of us, our jobs are really about making an impact, whether that's in society or on the business and the bottom line. Okay, so let's talk about the gaps and the generations, 4 generations in the workplace. In your own organizations, do people really understand there are 4 generations, and are they coexisting and just operating in their own spaces, or do you feel that they are truly collaborating and helping and learning from each other? And Kelly, I'll quickly start with you.
I think both is the answer to that question. So I think, I was looking at that slide that Fred shared with was it 70-something% of Gen Z wants their companies to weigh in. We feel that in our town halls every single time. So my CEO's name is Michelle. We have Ask Michelle Anything. People can ask anything, and they stand up and they use it as a soapbox. And that's absolutely true. That said, to your question about coexisting, we all need to hear that, right? And it needs to be positive pressure on the system as well. So I think, I also work in design and in a fashion company, right? So that you could ride our elevator. It's a stylish elevator for sure, right? So I think there is a coexisting that happens and that we're learning. And, the designers talk about they learn from the streets, right? And so I think that's all part of the piece of the puzzle. And as a heritage brand, we have to reintroduce ourselves and reinvent ourselves generation after generation. So if it was anything less than that, it'd be a problem.
Bill, your perspective from running an agency, are the generations actively seeking ways to work together and learn from each other? And as Kelly said in her remarks, really listening to each other, because the future of our industry are the young people for sure, and we have a lot to learn from them. I learned so much today, but they have a lot to learn from us as well. And I like to talk about minding the gap and galvanizing the gap, actively having people work together. Is that happening in the agency, or how do you make that more prevalent?
Well, Fred said it actually perfectly. The Gen Z, the millennials, the Gen Xers, and boomers in the organization actually realize that they have a role to play. So the Gen Zers in particular definitely want a place where they feel welcome, and they also want a place where they can learn and develop, but they also want to learn from the other generations, particularly boomers and the Gen Xers, their purpose and how did they find that purpose. So in an agency environment, we are forced to work together because our clients are changing and evolving, and they also reflect the diversity that exists in our country. So we all have to work together, and we all make a concerted effort to do that.
Kendall, I want to go to you because I'm so happy to have you. You are are you on the cusp of Gen Z? Zillennial, right. So in your career, have you ever felt that because you were on the younger side that maybe your voice wasn't heard? I mean, back in the day, it was the years on your resume that got you to the table. And I think if we continue to think that way, we will lose. But have you ever felt that you were looked at differently because you were younger, but you knew inside you had an important point of view to share?
Absolutely.
And how have you broken through?
I have broken through. I've been in PR officially 8 years this spring. But for sure, when I was starting off super, super green, even within the third and fourth year, literally learning how to arrange my resume and how I even present myself. I stopped putting years on when it came to education.
I stopped putting years on too. Maybe for a different reason.
But for sure have had to navigate that and in a lot of ways prove myself, especially when it comes to coming not only with a perspective, but an informed, a research-based perspective, and showing that the strategy didn't just come out of a pie-in-the-sky idea, but it was actually informed by the client's consumer's behavior or what's the upcoming trends. It's gotten a lot better, but even coming from a younger company where the primary demographic is millennials and Gen Z, that we still have some Gen X, there's even some moments where nobody's like listening to each other either, but having the patience to really discuss things. I think even coming from the zillennial and working with older millennials, things that they did at the beginning of their careers are vastly different. I had a boss once, when she started physically cutting clippings, now I'm an Excel grid. Put the link in the grid with the impressions. Exactly. So being able to meet each other in the middle, to work smarter and not harder, but also making sure that we're not hitting the goals.
And I think for the young people in the audience starting their careers, just reminding everybody that to give your point of view and not let anybody stop you because you don't know enough to have an opinion. I think we're very conscious of that, and I think it's really important.
Absolutely, and I think I'm so grateful throughout my entire career, even with, the different generational bumps and moments, there's always been an openness to hear my point of view, and to implement whatever ideas there may be. To Barbie's point, always give your ideas, even if they're getting blank stares on the Zoom calls.
And I think it's being in an organization that facilitates that, because not all of them do. Okay, I'm going to take a switch to a much more serious, complex topic, and I'm looking at you, Kelly. I mean, for all of us in the industry, you have been the guiding light of purpose and social responsibility and all of that. And Fred has talked about the polarization and the disheartening drop of people who, it's dropped from 89% in 2023 to 52% in 2025 about companies taking a stand. And I guess, and there's, a lot of talk about DE&I and how companies are talking about that. I guess from your point of view, what advice do you have for all of us across the generations, but I would say especially for those earlier in their careers who have not maybe been through as many storms in business as we have? How do we not be disheartened, number one? I guess it's a two-parter. And what advice do you have for choosing the right organization, or if you see something and believe in something, having the strength to speak up and maybe be that agent of change?
I don't think anyone's going to have an answer to
all
those questions.
You're the best person to give it a whirl.
But what I would say is, I think that data point that you quoted up front of going from 80-something to 55% just begs us to understand why. My speculation is it's fear and risk aversion, right? So I do think there are very real risks that we have to consider within the workplace that we didn't before. And the things that we see in the headlines just in the last couple of weeks, what's happening with law firms, what's happening, I mean, it's changed in terms of what the dynamics are. And we're going to have to keep understanding that. I think right now, the advice that we're following and that we're pushing ourselves really hard is to understand the issues. We are monitoring. My team is going to be smart. We're going to understand where this is evolving and what is going on, and we're not going to react. We're going to be thoughtful, and we're going to be ready when the time comes and when we pick our moments. And that's really the conversation that we're having internally. I think in terms of credibility within our organization, too complicated, and we're just going to put our heads down, then as a function, we're going to lose our credibility as well. And I think for us, it really comes back to our values. So I bored you guys a lot talking about our values, but our values show up. And that question of what side of history is going to be the right side of history is a really clarifying question. And I think if you hold those true, there will be a moment, and we need to be ready.
You said in your comments that values have always been non-negotiable at Levi's. And I think for all of us and everybody at whatever stage you are in your career, your own values as well need to be non-negotiable. And I think we all have to be brave enough to say, I can accept this or I can't. Bill, in running an agency and dealing with lots of issues and DE&I mean, what experience are you having with your own staff about people maybe being disheartened? How are you keeping everybody with some sense of hope and optimism?
We follow exactly what Kelly says, is that you need to look inward first, and the employees actually tell us some of the things that they need and want, but we're also being very empathetic about those needs. But we also are encouraging the companies that we work with to stand their ground and to stand for something. And if you are going to stand for something, then that's going to really mean something not only to your employees, but to the younger generations that are coming in. And you see that in the data, right? Is that young people want companies to not only embrace and align with their values, but to stand for something that's going to make a real impact. And so that's what we do at our company, is to make sure we listen to the employees, just as Kelly does, and allow them to guide us in taking that stance and providing that opportunity for them to do that.
And I think the bottom line is, whether you're talking about a company or an employee or the individuals, it comes down to your values and what you personally believe in and where you want to move forward toward. Okay, switching gears again, lightening things up just a bit. Hybrid work, an issue that is still on everyone's mind. So here the gap was really interesting. For Gen Z, work from home is an expectation. With 40% of Gen Zers say they would accept less pay in exchange for greater flexibility. Talk a little bit about how you think about remote work and hybrid work. And I want to also talk a little bit about the value of being together with people, especially in the earlier part of your career.
Absolutely. For me, I think it comes down to autonomy and having a choice. So going back to the data, if a lot of younger generations, if there's no choice, if there isn't an option, that's a turnoff. Like, oh, I'm required and expected to be here 5 days of the week. And I think especially with the younger generations, and I can personally speak to this, I graduated, I had to finish my last semester of grad school here at USC remotely because the pandemic had started. And then after that, getting all of my jobs following that was all remote because of the pandemic, and learning how to recognize what works for me at home and what doesn't. And then that transition into at Savage hybrid, 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. And especially being in an in-house position, that was necessary. That communication, Kelly talked about DNA. We have to talk. The social marketing, branding, supply chain, product. We have to talk. But again, there was still even a choice in autonomy and flexibility. Hey, I know it's a Wednesday, but I'm going to stay remote because I know I need to knock out 3 press releases, and having that option. So navigating it, especially with older companies or even older seasoned leadership, I should say, it's like, no. This is what the norm is. This is what is expected. But I think a lot of the Gen Z generation and even millennial generation feel strongly about it because they had to learn very early, unfortunately, due to unprecedented times, of how to work in different environments, remote, against their choice because of what was going on in the world.
So now, what is the policy at Yahoo? How do you work, and what gaps do you see across the generations?
At Yahoo, we don't actually have a one-size-fits-all approach. Every team has a little bit of a different way they are approaching, depending on their business needs. For communications, we have a flexible policy and approach, and frankly, it's allowed me to recruit phenomenal team members from Apple, from Amazon, from Meta, from Nike, and I think that flexibility has been a real attractive option, in addition to working at the coolest company in the world, Yahoo. But
shameless plug.
Shameless plug. But I also think that we have really incredible tools now to stay connected, and in a way that democratizes connection and access. Like, everyone knows how to use Slack, and we can connect in real time, regardless of what generation we represent. So I think it's been a real benefit to us. There's still incredible importance in coming together, building relationships, those hallway conversations. So we intentionally design times to meet up. Everyone's met each other. We go meet press regularly. So it's just by design.
Kelly, what advice do you have for people starting out in their careers about how to determine, are they going to take a role that's hybrid, a role that's remote, balancing being in the office, not? What advice do you have? What's your view?
I think Kendall told us the answer to this, and this is about having autonomy and the ability to make decisions. I'm connecting a couple of dots, so indulge me because it's not going to make all that much sense. But you raised some of the issues around DE&I, and we haven't actually talked about how much time all of us are spending on DE&I and how silly it is that what the pieces of the puzzle that we're talking about. It's not about semantics. It's about, do people feel like they have a sense of belonging in their organizations, and how do we facilitate that? And I think hybrid is a piece of that puzzle. And if you think about, so I would be Gen X, but I was there cutting out clips and highlighting and using the fax machine for sure. But if you even roll back to those days, we didn't spend 5 days in the office. We were at our clients. We were out on the road. We were with reporters. So there was no magical day when we were all chained to our desks. So to even think that that's the issue is not. It's a question of, do I feel respected? Am I able to do the best work of my career? And are there enough times that our team is getting together that we collaborate effectively? I think that's what people are asking of their leaders, and they bristle at this idea. I think all generations bristle at the idea that it's something about you're checking how much time I'm sitting in my chair.
I think you raised such a good point. It is also about trust. If you don't trust people to know that they have work to do, that they have obligations, so I think that's critical. I am a huge proponent of flexibility, of being able to build a career and have a life, but I also feel strongly, and no surprise to the Xeno people in the room, that being together is good for your soul, it's good for your mind. We're creative. So I don't think you can build and I know you're not saying this, I don't think you can build a career sitting behind a computer. I think there is so much joy to be derived from being together with people, but we all have dry cleaning to get, and we all want to get to our kids' games, and I know I love to make dinner at night, and technology allows us to do that, and my employer trusts that I'm paying attention when I need to pay attention, and I think we need to show our own people that we trust you, but give some guidance about what is good for them and good for us.
Agreed. I mean, and the other thing I think about is I ask for a tremendous amount of discretionary effort from my team. These jobs are 24/7 jobs. We have conference calls on Sundays. We have work that has to be done when the news is breaking or when something is coming together. And that's another component of the trust. It's a reciprocal relationship and an acknowledgement of that.
And when you have to show up, And when you're asked to show up, you show up.
Exactly.
Okay, AI, 2 favorite letters in the alphabet. Bill, you said Bill, you told us when we did our little prep session you wanted to talk about this. So we're all talking about AI. I think Gen Z, the data shows, is very comfortable with it. But misinformation is something that we all need to address. How should brands and agencies and companies, what should they be doing to combat misinformation?
They should continue to be talking to each other. The one thing I love about AI is that this is something that every generation needs to embrace. And I think in the PR industry, we are starting to embrace it and see the value that it brings. But we also need that human touch whenever we're working with AI. And this is where all the generations really need to lean in and be able to do the fact checking, be able to hold each other accountable. So that's how we do it.
Sona, would you like to weigh in on this?
On misinformation or AI?
Both.
Well, I think AI is probably the greatest tool that communicators have ever had in our careers, and will really truly allow us to democratize content creation and open up space and time to get creative, to collaborate with each other. Yeah. And I think it's super important that we as an industry take a very principled approach before we get too far.
Kendall, in talking to our own Gen Zers, I was surprised when I asked them how they're viewing AI. It was a group of 12. It's our own advisory board of Gen Zers at Zeno. They said they felt tremendous guilt. They felt guilt because they feel that they're turning to AI for work that they should be doing themselves. And I said, please don't feel that. This is allowing you to get to other more interesting work, to more strategic work. But how do you react? I saw you go like this.
Well,
so what do you think about that?
Shout out to integrity, I agree, and I have felt that way before. I think it's important at the end of the day, the writing. And I do agree about embracing AI as a tool, especially if it can help with editing and catching different errors and whatnot. But to Bill's point, we always have to make sure there's a voice, a human touch to it.
God, of course.
So it makes me smile. That's why I react. It makes me smile to know that the younger generation that I'm representing has that level of integrity of knowing, hey, I'm using AI, but that tells me, okay, there's still a reverence for writing and having strong writing skills. And now it's about marrying those two things together to make work. I'm all about working smarter, not harder. I think it's different when AI is being used, especially as a publicist or somebody doing the messaging, where they're solely relying on the technology and none of their own efforts or none of their own ideas or none of the company's mission and values and own messaging points are being folded into, and it's just a sole reliance on it. But as far as using it as a tool to make the day easier, to make the press materials get completed, absolutely.
But that's the beauty of it, that we can all use AI and use it as a starter and then get to the fun part, which is being a critical thinker and saying, can I do this better? Can I change it around? It just sort of gets your brain going. So my advice to them was not to feel guilt, but to use it in the right way and to use it to advance your thinking and, frankly, your careers. Because for some of us back in the day, we were cutting clips and doing things that were not exactly intellectually stimulating. Now I think there's an opportunity to get to that work much quicker and much earlier in your career.
I also think it can expand your thinking, right? So one of the things that we use is just to anticipate what would be the negative interpretation of this. So things that we just might not have the perspective on, and testing things before we actually use them has been really effective for us.
Absolutely.
Usually we remember to do that after we get ourselves in hot water, but sometimes we remember to do it beforehand.
Okay, I want to switch to another favorite topic of mine, but this was very, very important in the research, and that is the changing media landscape. And we're so happy that we have someone who is, one of the most iconic media platforms, and plug for Yahoo, celebrating its 30th anniversary. So Gen Z is not reading the Wall Street Journal, and Gen Z, you know, for some of us, when we started our career, it was a story above the fold in the Wall Street Journal. That was they don't know what we're talking about, but that was you got a gold star for that. But then it kind of evaporated, which is today the stories last. So how do you think, at Yahoo, how do you think about the balance between emerging media, traditional media? What's sort of your point of view? And then I want to go to the other panelists on how you use both in your day, because I don't think it's one or the other, but a combination of both.
Yeah, and I'll take a bit of a step back because I think this is maybe the biggest paradigm shift that we've ever seen in media since the advent of the printing press, since the advent of like broadcast media, the shift to digital. Yeah. But I think what it comes down to is trust. And people trust based on different reasons. It's either authenticity or it's authority. And I think we're seeing that big difference across the generations. Some are choosing Taylor Swift for her authenticity and celebrity endorsement. Some are choosing authority and the depth that comes from the New York Times. By the way, I'm excited by both. I'm like equally excited by both. I'm a millennial just like Yahoo. I'm the eldest millennial. But at Yahoo, we're also leaning into these trends. Yahoo News is the #1 news site in the U.S., but we're interesting in that we're an aggregator. We're curating content from over 1,000 different publishers, and we're also using original reporting that's meant to provide context. And I think that helps, right? We're bringing kind of the fragmented pieces into one ecosystem, and we know that people are starting their journeys oftentimes on social, so our articles are also on social. I start on social, and then I go to Yahoo News and dig deeper.
Right. Kelly, I mean, Levi's runs across the generations, so how do you think about what we call earned media and sort of the balance? I don't think it's one or the other. I think we need it all, but how do you think about that at Levi's in terms of the day-to-day work?
Yeah, well, it struck me looking at the data. I think it depends on what you're trying to accomplish first and foremost, right? So to reach our fans and on our marketing communications, that's going to be very heavy outside of earned media. Yes, that's a nice place to add, but that's not where we start. On the corporate piece, though, one of the things that I think is super interesting is that we have to convince those little tiny turquoise boxes that they're going to have to do things that they haven't done before, right? So you think about executive communications and sitting across from a C-level exec and saying, I'm going to have you talk to this fellow who writes a column on Substack.
Yes, yes.
And this is why that matters. And they start with, what the hell is Substack? And then they Google it, and then they say, I can't get in there, right? And so to say that those conversations are very shifting and very real, and I think that it's really easy for all of us to be like, well, I can do what I have always done. That'll be okay. But we know that's not what's right. And to really push ourselves for that innovation and to hear that from everyone around the table. So I know what I read in the morning, and I'm not always in the place that other people are. And really hearing from our team members and our agencies and everyone that's in the mix to say, we need to expand those lists. And we need to expand who we engage with.
I think you make such a good point. There is a job of education, and certainly coming from the agency point of view, we see this in the C-suite about it's not just the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and AP. Mm-hmm. This other emerging media can be even more powerful. So there is a re-education that needs to be done. Bill, for our young people starting out, I mean, what should they be looking at every day? Is it enough just to look at their phone, or should they be diving into some of the more traditional media as well to be fully well-rounded? And perhaps it also changes by the sector that you're in. I mean, fashion is one thing, technology and health, which is health still leans traditional, is another.
I actually don't always agree with the data, because I actually think now there's 4 generations living at home, and everyone's watching and consuming different media. So everyone is exposed to it. The parents are exposed to TikTok. I'm addicted to it in the morning, actually. And they're asking questions, and the parents and the grandparents are asking questions of the young people. The young people are seeing CNN and Fox because their parents are watching it. So you're seeing all the generations being influenced by the media. But I would say to young people, the best form of media is experience something. So I think the best advice I would have to brands and to agencies is to let young people experience your brand, not just see it, not just hear it, but to taste it and to smell it. And so that's a form of media that I think is going to be very important for them moving on, because if they are able to look at media and all the experiences 360, they're going to be better PR practitioners.
And coming from that generation, I highly agree with you, Bill, because that was going to be a piece of advice that I would give for those who are coming up literally right behind me, of being like well-breast in all different types of media. You can't just solely rely on social. You can't just solely rely on traditional, but being able to be well-rounded. And these are one of those generational threads that I hold on to even now, being the youngest one on the panel. I have to experience something. I have to engage with it on social, but also read it. Because when it's coming to strategy, especially managing up and advising C-suite members who, again, are like, we want the Vogue feature. I'm like, the product is not even out. Like, we can't do that. But being able to have, as if the goal is to build brand awareness and have some kind of relationship with the stakeholders, how don't we explore different ways that we can connect with them so that there is that touch point that you spoke of? Absolutely.
As our resident Gen Zer-ish, how do you start your day? What do you read? What are your must-reads? Or watches, or whatever you're doing on your phone?
Nowadays, I actually am starting off with CNN.
Oh,
I am.
right.
Because especially even coming from more of a lifestyle and fashion sector of the space, everything that's happening on a government, on a social climate level, it impacts fashion. It impacts lifestyle. So typically I'm starting off with that, and then lo and behold, I'll jump to a Vogue, I'll jump to a Elle, and I'll be able to see a through line immediately. I remember we were trying to figure out how we launched some of our 360 marketing campaigns during the election. Regardless of voting choice or what you supported, there was impact on the campaign, and we had to navigate that. And if we weren't paying attention to what was going on and making sure that we were activating media literacy and getting a full understanding and not just opinions, that is what helped guide us to make sure that we were still authentically connecting with our stakeholders while also being sensitive to what was going on.
Fred, do you want to go to questions?
With the audience.
With the audience. Okay, audience.
We have microphones. There's one right there.
Thank you. Very nice presentation. Thank you, everyone. Question going back to hybrid work environment, culture. Nobody talked about culture and the core values. So when you're only in an office 1 or 2 days, what is your opinion about building, retaining, enhancing your culture?
Lunch.
He's 100% right. It's always the free food. No.
Happy hour at 3 o'clock.
We did a study on exactly that topic, and we presented it to IABC last year. And we found that hybrid work does impact culture, but at the same time it improves morale. And that's the balancing act between those two things. And you have to decide which is the most important for your company, and also try to figure out how you can build culture when people aren't together all the time. And there are a lot of innovative ways to do that, but I think the idea that culture can only be built when people are sitting together is going to be a little out of date.
Fred, I think that's a really important point. I'm sorry, son.
Oh, no.
No, honestly, I think it's making us build muscles that we didn't have before as well. So we're a global company, but we really like to be plaza-centric is what we call our headquarters, right? And if we have an event, everyone will show up and they'll have a great time. That said, by having our all-hands meetings in a global way, virtual, and inviting everyone around the world, one of the pieces of feedback we get is don't be so headquarters-centric. Make sure that you're incorporating the folks who are online and the questions that are coming online. Don't ask questions about what's happening with the commuter shuttle. Ask questions about what's happening with the business around. And to me, that's a challenge for us to improve our culture to be more inclusive. And so we just have to learn how to do it differently.
And I think it's super important for employees to know when and where they can stay connected and feel informed. We do virtual town halls every single month, and the Slack channel for that is like one of the funnest places to be. There are so many emojis, a lot of connection, and so it does feel very connective.
And then for me, when I graduated from SC, I was with an agency remotely for 3 years, completely remote.
Wow.
Luckily, the founders were based in LA. However, they went above and beyond to make sure there was connectivity. So every quarter we had some kind of touch point, some kind of retreat. And even weekly they implemented virtual happy hours. We would play games. And some, looking from the outside, would be like, oh, that's a lot. But those efforts actually helped create a culture to make sure that the morale was still healthy.
Hi, my name is Daniel, and thank you for sharing your insights tonight. I wanted to ask about the AI pillar here. Barbie, you made the point that AI lets our teams get to the point where they can do their creative thinking. My concern is that they're not. My concern is that they're becoming really good prompt engineers, but not really good writers. How are you guys navigating that internally? Because as a senior person that's reviewing a lot of work, I'm seeing AI-driven content, but I could say it's not on point, sometimes missing a soul. There's a lot of different ways I can articulate that, but what it really boils down to is people aren't learning how to write, they're learning how to edit at best and just creative ways to repurpose content.
Wow. Who would like to go first? That was a lot. I mean, that kind of breaks my heart, to be honest, as someone who loves to write and loves words. I can't speak for other organizations here, but AI is a tool that gets us started. I think it is incumbent upon the leaders and the managers to have the eye and to understand that we cannot be producing soulless work. You know, if I have access, if I prompt AI on something, so is the next agency and the next agency and the next agency. So, you know, you can't all be delivering the same stuff. I think, like anything, it starts with the top about how to think about AI as a tool, as a start. But we expect, and you know, one thing we didn't talk about, but expectations and explaining your expectations, especially to new people coming on. We talk about it a lot. We think that they know because we know, but they don't unless you say it. And our expectation is that you use AI to get the juices flowing, to get a first draft. But we expect you to take a critical eye. We expect you to edit it. We expect you to share it with colleagues and make sure it isn't soulless. So that I appreciate the question. It makes me sad. That's not the quality of work I know that we want to produce, nor do I think it's the quality of work that our clients expect, and we certainly will not allow that to be the case.
We asked that question in the survey, and writing was the number one thing, number one skill, and every generation thought that was the most important thing.
And obviously it's super important not to skip levels of the video game and ensure that, you know, people joining the industry are gaining that foundational expertise. But there are so many other ways to leverage AI today, including, you know, looking through your transcriptions and getting some action items coming out of things. You know, I put this report into Notebook LM and I listened to a podcast on it. It was really interesting.
How'd we sound?
We sounded great. We sounded great. You know, so there are many different ways that our team is kind of leveraging it, but it's super important that everything has human review. And as a leader of the team, I have that sixth sense to identify when something's off and make sure that's not the direction we're going down.
It's not meant to be like a cheat. It's meant to be an additive partner and tool.
Yeah, when I connect the dots from what we were talking about culture and then bridge into here, one of the things I know that's core in our team is peer review. Like folks know that someone else on the team is going to review, and there's a sniff test for sure that goes with people who generate content and don't do the hard work to make sure that it lives up to quality. And it's a little bit of a diss if you hear like, looks like you probably generated that, didn't really work on it. And so I don't think that's something that is going to be tolerated in a team that holds itself to high quality.
Right.
And you know, for the students sitting in the audience, just again, the Gen Z rep, shameless plug for USC and the Center of PR, and Fred and Jen Floto and Ron really lean into these classes, because I can say hands down, as someone who at this point in her career has hired on and has been on the other side of being interviewed as well, the strategy, the education, the writing skills that I acquired at SC definitely makes me stand up from other candidates. And not only that, but I can confidently say using AI as a tool and not as a crutch.
Hi, you all talked a lot about companies really trying to stand for things, whether that's their values, their issues, something on an issue, and a lot of that's driven by employees, really urging and pressing you all to do that. But we're in such unprecedented times. I'm wondering, when you stand for something, particularly some of the issues that would normally be very acceptable, are now being targeted. You could raise your head up and get targeted for being attacked and potentially punished at a very high level. Is that changing the conversation now with leadership, or how is it changing the conversation with leadership and the board, saying, maybe we can't raise our head up and stand for that, or we can't be very visible standing for something? Is it changing because of this very recent kind of situation?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I've got to believe that, and I think you were kind of indicating that we're going to have to think about it, pick and choose our time and whatever, because I think it's become a very dangerous thing to stand for things.
Yes, and to be inconsistent is dangerous as well. So there are as many examples of companies that didn't stand up for their values being held to account on that as ones who are changing because
that used
of the
to
pressure.
Be the thing. Yeah.
So it's just complicated.
It is very, and I'm curious how you're navigating
amount
that.
Of time talking about it and figuring out sort of how do you navigate. And really, at this point, I think it's a matter of monitoring, picking your moments, and really, for now, trying not to be reactive, because it changes in 12 hours too, right? And so.
We're PR people. We should figure this out. For instance, look at Costco. Costco was smart. Costco used their voice and met with the board in advance, talked to shareholders, talked to employees, and they demonstrated why DE&I is in their in their DNA. So I think in PR, this is what we should be doing: is we should be thinking ahead about what the headwinds are going to be. And of course, this is a time where we don't know, but we have some skills that we can do this. Let's talk to the employees. Let's talk to our shareholders. Let's talk to our board. Let's take a stand and get people behind it. I think
and use the data. Benchmark. There are an equal number of examples of companies on the positive side of standing up, using their proxy, maybe executing a little bit differently, but there's an equal number of examples on both sides. It's just one gets more headlines than the other.
And she said it best. Actions speak louder than words. We have an ability to change minds. But if we do this in advance, people do support what they help create. And so I don't like to give companies an excuse to say we're going to change things. If they were smart, they would have thought about these headwinds earlier. And they would be very proactive about talking to their employees like you do, talking to your customers like you do, and also talking to your board and shareholders and letting them in on why this matters. And then you take a position, because the risk of waffling is worse.
Hi, panelists. Thank you so much for being here today. This has been a really fascinating talk across the generations. I'm Ziana. I'll be graduating in May, and I'll be entering the workforce soon. And I think what I would really want to learn more about is, as I enter the workforce and I'll be working with people of different generations, what does positive and productive collaborations between generations look like? And for Gen Z, what working relationships and dynamics should we be striving for in the workplace?
I think one super important thing is to make sure we're listening and seeking to understand each other instead of assuming. I think that is probably the most risky thing. So just taking that time to have conversations, seek different perspectives, understand different people's experiences to kind of grow your own point of view and your own experiences and for them to gain from you.
I would say respecting each other's views is super important, and understanding that everybody brings a different life experience to a particular challenge, and having an open mind to do things a little bit differently, whether it's the Gen X and boomers or the Gen Z. I am a firm believer that we are better together, and we have so much to teach each other and support each other and lift each other up. And in our business today, new creative solutions is truly the name of the game. And I think those are going to come from all of us working together and bringing new expected and unexpected ideas and ways of communicating and telling our stories. So it's all of our moment, not just one generation's. It's all of our moment together.
And I would say, as somebody who's entering the workforce, this is some pivotal advice someone gave to me when I was, don't forget to network laterally, because even laterally, there's different generations. So keep that in mind. I know sometimes we can be like, I got to meet the CEO and I got to meet the CMO, which is great. Love you, Barbie.
I'm not that important.
But even still, the people that you are networking laterally are the ones who are going to be coming up with you. I literally have gotten opportunities or have extended opportunities because of an old USC colleague or somebody I used to supervise at my former agency. So don't forget to network laterally.
That will be your network for life.
Yeah.
25
seriously.
years from now, you'll say, we did this now, and then you'll all be helping each other. That's a great point.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. This is a question for anyone who would like to answer, but Kelly, you mentioned earlier that remote work with, I guess, Levi specifically, comes with the expectation of working 24/7. So I was wondering, do you think there is a negative connotation?
You knew that would catch someone.
Do you think there's a negative connotation with remote work as employees? Like, for example, do you think that there's potential to promote toxic behavior like toxic positivity or like not wanting to take a sick day because like there's no commute? And like, how do you kind of like help combat that with the team?
So I'm going to parse that. So I wasn't saying that Levi's expects people to work 24/7. I was saying that communications is a time-consuming profession. So if you choose to come into communications, you have to be realistic about the news cycles that we operate in, and that we will work in, our work will ebb and flow. And there will be times when it's all in and it's whatever it takes to get it done. So that's what I was referring to, and I believe that to be true. Like, this is a job that requires hustle, first and foremost. I think the second question you asked was, is that a enabler or something that proliferates negative behaviors? And I think that's a piece of, there are many things that do that, and we all have to be advocates. What I've noticed in the workplace is a tremendous amount of increase of focus on well-being and making sure that people are finding the time. One of the things that we brought out of the pandemic was the last Friday of the month is basically a well-being day for the company. And there have been lots of folks who've raised their hand to say, the same executives who are saying, why don't we get everybody back 5 days a week, are raising their hand and saying, why are we still doing, we call them corporate Fridays. It's a tremendous benefit that people feel really valued, they feel trusted, and it's a competitive differentiator for us. So there's a give and take on both of those, but I do feel like that mental health is such a more open conversation in the workplace that's really the positive benefit that I think is the counterbalance to what you're talking about.
If I can just build on that, I think that, yes, this is a tough, every business is tough. This is a tough business. We're at the mercy of the news cycle, and the crisis is always on a Friday night or Thanksgiving. But we owe it to ourselves and our colleagues, our clients, the companies we work for, to take that time. Nobody can do it 365 days of the week, 24/7. So the opportunity to do something else, to find some joy, one of my favorite words, it will make you better, it will make your colleagues better, it will make the work better. I know Kelly did not mean that she expects people to work 24/7, and I agree that there are ebbs and flows, but as important as being available for the next issue and next big news cycle, so too is to say, I need a break and I need to refuel so I can be better for tomorrow or the next day.
Hi, I'm Melinda with PRSA LA, and we love that you're doing this. Thank you so much for another incredible gathering. I wrote down my question because so many things are going through my mind. I'm like, okay, I've got to formulate this question correctly. So thank you to the USC Annenberg for bringing us all together. There have been so many challenges that we're facing as an industry that you've talked about today. And thank you for reminding us that there are generational gaps as well. Like, the data is very concerning. So that said, it's clear that as communicators, we know how to question what's happening. We know how to find out why it's happening, but also to act together. And so my question is to each one of you, if you together formed the best of the best agencies and just one great agency, what would be the one thing that individually each one of you would work to advocate to change in our industry?
Wowza.
Wow. That's a good question. Yeah.
You gotta go.
Let's huddle and figure out the answer.
Honestly, I think just comms having a seat at the table from the onset is super important. Many problems could be avoided if it starts there. So I would say that.
I would say bring Gen Z and millennials to the leadership table early. And not have this hierarchical system within our agencies where the executives all talk and then but bring Gen Z and millennials and bring them to the table early and not hide problems or challenges from them, but let them be part of the solution.
I think we're doing this, but I think it's continuing to lean in on the soft skills. I think that we have to be the people who say the thing, whatever it is, and are willing to put it on the table and push hard to make sure that we understand what the real is, and then we figure out what we're going to communicate. But I think continuing to value those soft skills that people need to bring to be able to build trust, to be able to build their influence, and be able to make an impact in an organization is incredibly important.
And I think for me, it's sort of kind of piggybacking off of what Bill said, but the advocacy of it all and empowering the younger generations, but all of us to be open-minded and have those conversations. Literally, even your point earlier about comms having an earlier seat at the table, a lot of that times that happens because there's miseducation or misinformation about what PR comms role is in general. So having the camaraderie and the advocacy even internally and being able to equip people to show how to be a good advocate, not only for an issue, but for a stakeholder, but for a person, that's what I would want us to bring to the table as an agency.
Well, I think we're building a fantastic agency here.
I'm ready, Barbara. Barbie, let's go for it.
I would just add two things, just building. One is that we all come to the table first as smart business people, not as the channel that we operate in. I'm a media person, I'm a digital person. First, it's about solving a business challenge and understanding what that is. And the second thing I would say that the ultimate measure is impact. Impact on business, impact on society, impact on whatever is important to that situation.
Lasting impact.
Hi, thank you. I'm a USC alumni. Thank you for being here. We touched on soft skills. And so my question to you all is, what have you seen either lacking as far as soft skills in PR or what has driven somebody to succeed in PR as far as soft skills?
Oh, I can start. And the younger generation might look at me crazy, but getting on the phone. A lot of younger generations don't like to get on the phone, and
Oh, boomers say this all the time, by the way.
But literally, maybe I'm secretly a boomer. I don't know. But I will say, again, I'm just somebody who truly believes in taking a piece of everything to make a bigger picture. And one piece of advice that I've just witnessed with older generations is getting on the phone. That is a soft skill I think is dying out a little bit with the younger generations. I literally had a save the day moment just because I got on the phone with Telemundo. Like, who would have thought? But had I got caught up in like, ooh, I'm just going to email, I've had to push back on that. So I would say getting on the phone is one of those soft skills that I think is lacking and we could see more of.
I'm being told we have time. Fred said, one more question.
That was good.
No pressure on the last
That was
question.
great.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. We've obviously spoken a good amount about the political divide and corporate responsibility with how we present our stands on that. I think as organizations, we often get tunnel vision on, and probably rightfully so, on how it's perceived externally when we take a stand. But how do you evaluate taking a stand without alienating the people internally inside the company as well, and focusing on the internal communications aspect of making sure that, especially while we're having a conversation about generational divides, right, where people have a lot of different points of view, without making anybody inside the company feel alienated at their own place of work?
I'll tell you a little story. So when we decided to weigh in on gun violence prevention, one of the executives who managed our business in Texas called me up, and he said, I hear you, and I want you to know if you're telling me that I'm not going to be able to protect us, then that's on you. Now, lots of pieces of information came out in that phone call. Number one, apparently he was carrying to the office, which we didn't know. But number two, that he felt that sense of responsibility. What made me really happy was he called, right? And there was room for a dialogue. And not only did we have that conversation, we had that conversation in an open town hall. And the challenge was that our leaders felt that people should be able to come into our stores and feel safe, and our employees should be able to feel safe in their workplace, and that we wanted to be a part of that solution. And while there's room for people to have differences of opinion, we want them to talk about it. We want them to know that we'll hold space for it, and we'll still move forward on where we're going to land. And I think that has been a really consistent piece of the puzzle for us, is when we do take what could be perceived as controversial stands, we make extra space internally for people to share their points of view and for that to be okay, and really invite those conversations as opposed to wait for them.
Thank you all very much. This was really a great conversation. Kelly,
We have to say thank you to Barbie. Barbie, great job, Barbie.
This is your award, Kelly. Don't forget.
Oh, thank you. Look at that.
Thanks everybody for being here, and thank you panel for being so great. I really appreciate it. Thank you everybody for all your help. Ron and the students, amazing. Good night. Thank you, Frank. Thank you. You did a wonderful job. You all are great.